Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining the Southwest Center for Human Relations Studies here at the University of Oklahoma in Norman for the kickoff of our 2021-2022 webinar series, although today is a workshop. I am Dr. Jenny Rongo. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwest Center, and I'm the Director of ENCO. I'm very delighted to welcome you and to be your host this afternoon. Our hope is that we continue the conference's tradition of working to improve racial, ethnic, and intercultural relations on college campuses and community organizations, providing virtual learning with opportunities like this one. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, ENCO offers 2 webinars per month on the first and last Wednesday of each month. Some of the webinars are free, others are offered at a modest fee of $25. Our next webinar is titled, It's Complicated, Taking Up Space as Asian American Women in Higher Education. It's going to be presented on the 29th of September by Dr. Claire Vadrama Wallace, an assistant professor at the School of Nursing at California State University of East Bay, and Dr. Elizabeth Ching, assistant professor of occupational therapy at Samuel Merritt University. Please visit our website, enco.ou.edu, for the full list of featured webinars for this season. Today we have Li Manhua, an internationally renowned Chinese-American documentary filmmaker, author, poet, Asian folkteller, educator, community therapist, and master diversity trainer. He is the executive director of Starfry Seminars and Consulting, a diversity training company that provides educational tools and workshops on cross-cultural communication and awareness, mindful facilitation, and conflict mediation techniques. His first documentary film, Stolen Ground, about the experience of Asian Americans, won honorable mention at the San Francisco International Film Festival. His famous film about racism, The Color of Fear, won the gold medal for Best Social Studies Documentary. And in 1995, Oprah Winfrey did a 1-hour special on Li Manhua's life and work that was seen by many. His latest film, If These Hands Could Talk, was just released. The film's focus is on college students and their experience with racism and other diversity issues in higher education. Thousands of people from government and social service agencies, corporations, and educational institutions have taken Li Manhua's workshops and partnered with Starfry Seminars and Consulting on their diversity initiatives. We are very grateful for Li Manhua's time today and his team. Just a reminder that this is a workshop and it's not a webinar. So if you're able to show your face, please do so. We'd want to interact that way. And this webinar, this workshop will be a little longer than the webinars we provide. It's going to be 2 hours. And we request that you stay for all 2 hours so that you can get the best of everything. If you need ASL, please let me know so that during breakout rooms, you can move with a provider in your space. We have 2 ASL providers with us. We also have a CAT provider. I will now turn it over to Li Manhua and the team from Starfry. Welcome.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, Jane. It's always fun to come here to NCORE, even if it's online. I always used to joke that my room would be like 20 people to start off with, and then it would just go fill out to the hallway. So it's really nice to come into your homes. And today I'm very fortunate to have Yi Li, if you could raise your hand there. It's going to be joining us today to co-facilitate. And before we begin, because today's workshop is about how do you deal with conflicts in the classroom, okay? And so I'd like to just ask some folks, why are you here? I mean, why are you here? And what do you hope to get out of this class? And Michelle, you look all alert back there. But I was looking at your background too. Yes, Michelle, Kaylee, Callie. Why are you here today? What do you hope to learn?
Well, I used to work at the University of Nevada, Reno in cultural education. This was a long time ago. And then I became a music educator and I moved into the high schools, the middle schools, the elementary schools. And oftentimes my fellow colleagues would never think I'm the teacher. Every school I ever went to, no one ever thought I was the professional. Everyone always said, "Oh, who are you here to pick up?" And
Wow.
so the kids in the classroom at all levels really appreciate me and love me. None of the admin or anybody who was not understanding of cultural did. So I'm here because I am currently out on my own, trying to change music education, creating resources that teachers can use in the classroom. That way I can have more influence on the children of the schools who I couldn't work in because of too many, I guess, discriminatory remarks towards myself. Anytime I would bring up, hey, this song isn't culturally relevant with a colleague, I was basically told she's aggressive, she's hounding me, you know, the white fragility, all of that. And so I'm here because I also attended 2 of your sessions years ago when I was 19. I'm now 40. And at the time I was a university student before I went to Cultural Works. And one of the things you pointed out at that time, and I spoke up during the session, one of the things you pointed out is that none of the white students in our session spoke up. And so you actually asked me not to share anymore because because of what's going on. And so I've taken a lot of your principles throughout the years, and I still find that being understanding isn't enough. Me, myself, having a master's degree isn't enough. Having years in college experience isn't enough. And so I'm here to see how things have changed so that I can hopefully return at any point to education or create my own space for myself being Native American as well. Most people think we're not alive. And I think the stereotypes about my culture also factor into how people treat me. And I just want to be seen as a person. I don't want to be seen as a stereotype. I don't want to be seen as the mad brown woman. And so that's why I'm here. I want to make a difference in education still.
Yeah. Wow. How many of you can hear the emotion in Michelle's voice? Raise your hand. How many of you, as you were listening to Michelle's energy, that it also is familiar to you in your own life? Raise your hand. Why don't you take a good look around, everyone? Yeah. And I was just thinking, Michelle, as you were talking, you said that being a teacher, being this is still not enough. And I wanted to add one more thing. Even being the president of the United States would still not be enough. As we watched how this last president, Barack Obama, was treated. Yeah. Wow.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have to do the land acknowledgement first before we start the session.
Wow. Okay. And maybe we could have you read it, Michelle.
So this land on which I inhabit is physically situated in the original ancestral homelands of the Chochenyo, Muwekma, and the Ohlone. We pay respect to the Chochenyo, Muwekma, and Ohlone peoples, past, present, and future, and their continuing presence in the homeland and throughout their historical diaspora.
Thank you.
And I myself, I'm a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe in Nevada. I'm Washoe, Shoshone, Paiute, and Quinault, and I am in the original homelands of my tribe. We were not displaced.
Mm. Thank you. You're a powerful speaker, Michelle, with incredible heart and passion. And also, I could feel your tears too. Can you hear that, everyone? That there were tears between her words, and there still are. So I'd like to ask you, Deborah, why are you here today, and what do you hope to get out of this class?
I teach a lot of adults, and they come from different business backgrounds, but I often don't know what their personal backgrounds are because they're in professional type programs. And when there are conflicts that arise in the classroom, they seemingly arise out of nowhere. And I would like to figure out how to see potential conflicts before they reach the classroom.
Good luck. Good luck. Because I always joke when I did If These Halls Could Talk, students talking about diversity in our schools. What's out there is in here, and what's in here is out there. And is the least topic that we ever talk about. And so you need to be reassured that what goes out in the world sometimes never gets talked about in the classroom, and it builds up and it builds up until one day it explodes. Raise your hand if you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. And whether or not you feel safe enough to talk about it. You have the environment. So it's not just talking about it, but whether or not you feel safe enough to be able to talk about that. I'm going to shift over here for a bit. And I'd like to ask you, when you think about, I'd like you to think about, and we could put it up on the screen about a difficult person, okay? So I'd like you to think about this today. So I'd like you to describe the person you would have the most difficulty in a conflict. Describe what they would be saying, their ethnicity, gender, etc., and share why, and then what's familiar about this person for you, okay? So what I'd like to ask is, Trevor, what would be, describe a person you would have difficulty in a conflict with, and I could describe their ethnicity, gender, what would they be saying or doing? What would make it difficult for you to have to struggle with them in a conflict? What would they be doing or saying?
You know, I mean, I don't really know specific, you know, gender or I guess age or whatnot. It's just, I guess it really depends on, you know, like the situation. Like I've had, you know, I guess, I don't know, I guess maybe I could maybe give an example of something I've had or a difficult situation. I had a relative who obviously, well, she's Black, she's in her 50s. And, you know, she had an idea of who I was supposed to be, and I kind of didn't agree with that. But
okay, so it might even be a person who, no matter what you say, still doesn't believe you or try and understand what you're like or what you're saying. And I saw you nod your head there, Sharon. What kind of person would you have a difficulty with in a conflict? What would they be sounding and looking like?
So in a class setting, I often teach about race, racism, and similar topics in a sociology class. There will be people that would push back against some ideas. And I know I'm generalizing, but the typical or even stereotypical student that would push back against the data that I'm pulling would be a white young man who would feel very, very confident, and he will provide all kinds of examples from his lived experiences, and would refuse to acknowledge that the data, the statistics that I'm showing are facts.
Uh-huh. And then what does that do to you when you get that pushback?
So
Or
I'm
maybe
always
even-
I'm inviting the class to reflect, and this is a good timing to talk about validity of data and where our knowledge come from,
yeah,
and
I understand
should
that.
we
But,
seek relevant knowledge?
no, I understand that. But what comes up to you emotionally when someone pushes back? You see how that's different question
Yes,
for,
yes.
for sharing everyone? Yeah. What comes
So
up?
it's when I first started teaching in the United States, as you can notice, I have a thick accent.
You have a beautiful accent.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't fishing for compliments or anything.
No,
Uh,
but I appreciate it because I think that so oftentimes this country talks about being multicultural, but is very monolingual and doesn't appreciate accents except if they happen to be French, English, or Australian.
that's so true.
How many of you know what I'm talking about? Raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah, that's the underneath story, right? That we don't get to.
Yeah. So when I first started teaching in the United States, I felt that was a pushback against me. The student noticed that I'm an immigrant, and maybe I'm, not professional enough. The imposter syndrome just jumped right out of me. But now I understand that, from reading some of the content that you sent us, I completely agree that we do neglect our white students. And I think that it comes as a resistance, a sort of a way to control their environment. And
Yeah. And
I'm not taking it personally anymore.
Yeah, because they're actually a product of what they have not learned.
Exactly.
And they're also a product of blaming and attacking and being denial. So when they constantly see that as a response rather than being curious or open. Yeah. And let's see, Maya, I also saw you nodding when Sharon was talking. So what is the type of person that you just feel like, in a conflict that would just up your temperature?
The word that got me was confidence, that Sharon used, because when I picture a person, whether they're male or female, typically, older and white, even young men, it's that confidence, that feeling of no matter what I say, no matter what experiences I share, of my own personal experiences, or especially if I'm trying to relay and be an advocate for somebody else, that I'm going to be like broken down and pinned in a corner and made to justify everything that I'm thinking or experiencing. And that really terrifies me, because then I feel like not only I'm letting myself down, but I'm letting down everybody that I'm trying to advocate for.
As you were just sharing that, in my book, I have a case study in my book called The Art of Mindful Facilitation. And in there, I have one called The Color of My Fear. And one day I was doing a workshop, and this white male in the very front was sunglasses, charismatic. And then he questioned my credentials. As first he attacked my co-facilitator and demanded her license in diversity, of which there's none. She had a counseling degree, et cetera, but he demanded that she have a license. And then after that, he turned to me and also asked me the very same question. He made fun of my name. And then what I did was and it was just something, Sharon, you were talking about that reflection. I took it in. The process I use is, what am I feeling right now? And I kept saying, what's familiar about this feeling? Like you just talked about, Maya. And then I realized, and so I looked at him and I said, I'll answer your question about the license if you'll answer mine first. And he goes, okay. And I said, would you have asked me for my license if I were white? And he goes, you got me. No, I wouldn't have. And I said, I wasn't trying to get you, but I wanted you to show you the two Americas, The ones where as white, you may never have to be worried about your credentials, your education, your intelligence, but that we do. And I just turned the whole room. How many of you know exactly what I'm talking about? Having to prove that you're smart enough. And then what happened is all these people in the workshop raised their hands, and then that became the dialogue. So that I quickly moved it over from myself. And the definition of facilitation is to be a bridge. Can you hear that, everyone? To be a bridge to let them have the dialogue. So what I simply did was to start it off. Because I said to him, I wasn't out to get you. I just wanted you to feel and try and understand how our worlds might be very different. And today we are constantly being bombarded with confrontations, escalation, and it's starting to pass for healthy communication. Can you hear that? The norm. I can see a lot of nods. And that's why I think we're at a place, everyone, where we're going to have to deal with these new ways and new types that aren't so new, but are becoming mainstream now. This is the way you talk to people. Like you hear about all these school board meetings. People just literally yelling at the score. One guy even said, I'm going to come with 25 guys to beat you up. And no one even saw that. He was a elected official. That it was okay to come in with 25 people to beat up these school board members who they disagreed with about, masks and all this. And I was just thinking, what are we modeling for our children? What are we modeling to our students and our constituencies is physical violence and also armed violence. And so today, this is what we're doing here today is extremely important. Every single shootings in our school, every person in that school said, we did not expect it would ever happen here. Every single person who's been a shooter has a one common characteristic, and that is being bullied for being different. And so it still is going on until we talk about it. It will still remain. It will not go away because we're silent. It will not go away because we don't want to say the words racism, that we don't want to talk about critical race theory. It will not go away just because we don't use the words. It'll just build up. And that's why today, why we want to work with you on this. And first of all, we'd like to show you what a cycle of change looks like. What escalation, de-escalation, and what transformation looks like to remind us what it looks like. And Yili, if you could read the first one, once we get it up on the screen here. And what escalates is?
One, emotionally disconnected.
So we're just disconnected. And number two, what also escalates is? Being defensive. And when people are defensive, I also often ask, so what are you defending? Isn't that a good question? What are you defending? Number three.
Attacking and blaming.
Ooh, we see a lot of that today. Number four. Being in denial. Number five.
Saying nothing.
And the last one is? Not willing to change, okay? Good thing we memorized these, huh, Yili? And the next one is what de-escalates?
One, being emotionally responsive.
Number two, staying open.
Number three, being curious.
Number four, being self-reflective, taking a look at what you're doing. Number five.
Taking responsibility.
And number six.
Willing to change.
The willingness to change. And the next one, and this is what transformation looks like, everyone. By the way, this is all in your book that we gave you. Transformation happens when people feel
heard.
When people feel valued.
Number three, understood.
And when people on number four feel believed.
And last one, there is a willingness to change.
Good. All of these are incredible. I want you to take a good look at this. Is exactly what Me Too and Black Lives want every single time they protest, is to be heard, to be valued, to be understood, to be believed, and that there's a willingness to change. These are all the ingredients. Now, what we'd like you then to take a look at that about curiosity. It is my belief that curiosity is the gateway to empathy. And Thich Nhat Hanh said this, who was a Buddhist monk. And he said the curiosity is a gateway to empathy. And he was also the only person in Martin Luther King's life that he nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. I hope you read his books. I use the term mindfulness because it was a term that Thich Nhat Hanh created. And the next one is, what is that curiosity? What are those type of questions that are really important to ask? And this is what we call the art of mindful inquiry. Number one.
What I heard you say was.
And this is reflecting back what someone says and using their words. And number two, tell me more about what you meant by. This is gathering up more information. Number three.
What angered you about what happened?
Number four. What hurt you about what happened? I strongly believe that as a therapist, that anger is not a primary emotion, but rather hurt is. When hurt is unacknowledged or invalidated, it becomes anger, which is what Michelle and other people sharing, other people were talking about, is when your hurt is not acknowledged or validated, it becomes anger. That anger does not come out of a vacuum. Can you hear that, everyone? We didn't just suddenly come out angry, but something caused it. So it's really important to look at the root of the disconnection. And number five.
What's familiar about what happened? How did it affect you? How does it affect you today?
Good. And number six. Good. That's the part that you just mentioned. And number six is, what do you need or want? And we often go to this one so we could skip all the ones above. And that's why I think we're in such a trouble we are today with diversity, is because you could go to definitions and to solutions rather than it's the emotional part, and to find out the point of disconnection. Okay, so we're going to put these in your box for you to look at. And what we're going to do is we're going to go a little bit deeper today and do something different. And Liberty, how many folks do we have in the room?
Mari, how about 151?
151. Okay. So let's see. We can do then 3 to a group, okay? All right.
Okay.
Okay, good. All right. So we'll do 3 to a group. And what we're going to do is we're going to have to do an assessment, okay? And I strongly believe that this part is missing whenever we go right into diversity issues. It's a question that we have not bothered to ask, but it's essential if you're going to enter into doing diversity work, and that is a conflict history assessment. And Yili, if you could read these out.
Conflict history assessment. Number 1, how was conflict dealt with in your family? Number 2, how did it affect you, and how does it affect you today?
Wow, what we could learn if we did a conflict history assessment with Donald Trump. How was conflict dealt with in his family? We could really learn that, and why they turned out the way they did. So we're going to put this in your chat box, and we come back to the main room. Now, this is the way we would like you to do it. You're going to have 30 minutes, excuse me. You'll have 10 minutes each. You'll have 30 minutes. And you'll get to each share how conflict was dealt in your family. Now, the first one who shares gets the 10 full minutes. And then they get to choose the next person. Can you hear that? They get to choose the next person in their group, and they'll share. But before they share, that person will tell you what they were moved and what they were touched by what you shared, okay? So in other words, you just don't say something and then go on to the next person, but that they share with you, take about a minute just to share with you what touched and moved them about what you shared, okay? And then that next person will talk, and then when time you get to the third person, they'll share. And then the first person who started will tell them what moved and touched them about what they share. Okay? So in other words, every person will be acknowledged and a person will share with them how they felt and were moved by what they share. Okay? And we'll put the questions up there. Now, the person who's going to start in your group of 3 will be the person with the longest hair will start. Okay? The person with the longest hair. All right? Any questions? Now, one quick thing, everybody, the person will be sharing for that time. And if they finish a little bit earlier before the 10 minutes, you can ask them some more questions and see if they'll go a little bit deeper, but no more than 10 minutes per person, okay? So make sure you keep time with each other. And we'll have a little thing in there that will keep time, okay? To give you a 1-minute warning when the entire time is up, okay? Pay attention to that. Do not hit that button or it will eject you back into the main room and you won't be able to get back in, okay? Now, every time we say that, somebody goes like this, oh, I just got to push that button. I just want to, I have authority issues and I'm going to play them out again today. So though you do have authority issues, try and hold back, okay? And also don't forget to use these questions. That'll help you a little more, okay? And try to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk, all right? All right, ready? Begin.
I need just 1 more minute to finish the rooms.
Okay. So one more thing, everybody, don't turn off your screen or anything because it'll kick you automatically out of the room too. Okay, good.
Can we also announce that if you need ASL in your breakout, please?
I'm sorry, I can't hear what you're saying.
If somebody needs ASL in their breakout room, can they let the tech person know so that we can move one?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Why don't we do that? Thank you. Okay. Ready? Begin. How many of you, by a raise of hands, were touched or moved by this exercise? Raise your hand. How many of you were touched pairing up with your partners to learn more about them? Yeah. Imagine if you did this in your workplace, huh? Wow, what would that be like? I would like every single president of the United States to take this, this assessment before they become president, make it public so that we could see how they handle conflict, huh? So anyone, what was it like for you? What moved you about this exercise? Anyone? Alice, what was it like for you? You probably know, oh, I know he's going to ask me.
It was very, I really appreciated how giving my other 2 partners were. I think it's always amazing when you're open, how much you can learn from other people if you just listen. That was a really short amount of time. And I really appreciated how giving, how vulnerable, and how receptive the other 2 individuals were in my group. So extremely thankful.
Yeah, I want everyone to hear how receptive they were. I remember we just did a workshop about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and a woman came out to her agency and shared that she was gay. And then the first thing that came up for her was, Mary, when I saw your reaction when I said that, and you just smiled, it made me feel it's safe. Because she said, I was scared that people would pull back, look away. So those initial reactions, how receptive you are, make a lot of difference, don't they? Remember when we said staying open, emotionally present. Those are really important ones, aren't they? Yeah. And let's see, Dr. Marcus, what was it like for you?
Oh, thank you. It was very revealing and very bonding, so to speak. Speaking and very much appreciate just all of my trio knows who they are. Appreciating how seeing the common thread through a lot of our shares. Also noting how when there is and has been conflict, or one has been in a space of conflict, how that can affect the body, literally, physically, physiologically, let alone emotionally and psychologically. So that I definitely resonated a lot with me. And also seeing how, what I also very much appreciated was the arc of each of us sharing what happened, again, in our past relating to our childhood and as it relates to conflict, but also seeing how with ourselves as adults,
Yes,
at our various levels of adult space, how we've translated or parlayed or leveraged what took place in the past. That most was unpleasant, but how we've translated that into whether our professional offerings, to our ways to support others, help others navigate what we had gone through, but also others just within our own. We even shared again, our family structure, certain aspects of our family. So seeing how what had happened had some wisdom, translated to use that wisdom to do things differently now. And each of us sharing that really was a wonderful journey to be on, definitely for myself, for sure.
yeah. And then also to add to that is that it could also be what is still unfinished for us. So what was unfinished in our family, we play it out again. Remember earlier, my question is describe the most difficult person you'd have difficulty with. And sometimes it goes back to our families. We still carry on that difficult person. I remember my father was very verbally and physically abusive. And then when I met in the future in my life as an adult, very powerful, loud men, I would get really nervous and realized it was still unfinished inside of me. I remember somebody yelled at me once, really this 6-foot guy yelled at me in a workshop. And I said, God, you remind me of my dad. And I used to go inside, but today I'm going to decide to stay present with you. And then someone yelled out of the audience, he talks to us like that too. And he went, what? And then began a dialogue with them like, oh, I had no idea that I talk like that, which I think my father probably didn't. But he could have looked at our faces and seen the terror in our faces and could have learned from that. And that's where that wisdom you're talking about, Marcus. Yes. I see a lot of nods here. Norma, what was it like for you? Norma Alicia. Norma Alicia, hello. I recognize you.
Hello, Munwa. I hope you're well.
Thank you.
I met 3 very fine folks. What it was like for me is interesting to see the similarities and the differences, and also how for some folks, a family upbringing where conflict was seen and spoken about, how there was a tie-in that's why that they're that way as well, that they have ability to engage with conflict. And for me, it was the opposite. My family, silence that could last for years among family members, literally.
Yeah.
And as a child being very confused about it and making an intentional decision that in my family, it would never be that way.
Yeah. And people wouldn't know that's really the intention, to not have a vicious cycle continue. Yeah. So you see, when someone says, well, it was seen and it was talked about. So what I'm hearing from you, Norma Alicia, is it was seen but not talked about. And the silence can be very deafening, can it, everyone? Be very deafening. And maybe even along with that is someone once said, when the truth becomes too hard to bear, we create another one so that we could survive. I could see a lot of nods in the room when I said that. And yeah. And Nalia, I hope I'm saying that right. What was it like for you? Thank you, Norma Alicia.
It's, I guess, transformative because when I was listening to my partner's share, I was able to, suddenly things seemed very clear about like when we see somebody responding in a way, like hearing how they grew up gave me an understanding of like how some people might perceive me and my reactions. And then me sharing how I grew up, I think helped them to understand why some people respond in a different way. And so we were like kind of exploring that. And I think ultimately what you had shared about hurt being a primary thing, I think for people who are hurt, who never felt heard, tend to get loud sometimes because you're constantly we're fighting to be heard, and that hurt is there. And so we were even talking about how that plays out in the classroom and how sometimes you might think you've already given space for somebody, but they keep trying to talk and talking about how that we could be thinking about what hurt has played out in their life, that, and the ways it may have played out in not feeling heard. And then particularly if on top of that, they feel triggered by something, by somebody, something that somebody said that relates to like one of our social identities, right? That you also feel unheard or unseen or judged about, how all these things just kind of layer together and create this storm and, come out. And so.
Exactly. One of the techniques I use sometimes when you see something where there's a disconnect, so there's several ways you could ask people what came up, but you could also turn to the group and go, anybody notice what just happened here? See how you get to use them. It might say, oh, I felt she was talked over, or you invalidated. And then you could follow it up with those questions that we had is, what angers you about that? What hurts you? What's familiar? Because also underneath there is also, how does that affect you? Just like what you were talking about, Marcus, is how does that affect you today? When that happens, well, I get really angry. I really escalate. So when people escalate, that tells you something's unfinished. When someone has to repeat something 3 times, it's because they don't feel heard. It's kind of obvious, isn't it? That they don't feel heard, but we just keep that they, there's a Buddhist saying is you want to get to a different place, you have to take a different path. But somehow Americans keep going down the same path, hoping they'll have a different result. Or as Mark Twain says, Americans always do the right thing after they've tried everything else, which I thought was a great way of putting it. Yeah. So you could see a lot came up for you, isn't here? So people could reveal how they saw their parents fighting. And that'll make sense why they fight the way they do with other people in the class, or how they respond to people in that way. That's exactly what couples do, don't they? They have to learn how they do anger, hurt, etc. And so we've got to remember, because it takes years before someone will actually tell you the truth of that, so that you don't keep repeating the same unhealthy ways to communicate. And in your booklets is also unhealthy ways to communicate, starting pointing out what those look like. So what we're going to do right now, and this is kind of fun because I have never shown this one, is we did a lot of role plays that we filmed. And this one has my son, who's adopted from Guatemala. And I just picked it out today, and I thought, oh, there he is. He's ready to do one. And he's it actually really did happen to him. And he goes through this. So we're going to show this one. It's called our student recording, Joaquin number 2. And he was adopted from Guatemala. And he's a Guatemalan and Mayan.
Advanced interventions number 2. Take 1.
As a Guatemalan Mayan student, I feel like I'm always having to lead 2 lives. One where I could be myself, and the other where I have to blend in and speak perfect English.
Mm-hmm. So, Joaquin, what I heard you say was that as a Guatemalan and Mayan student, you feel like you have to always lead 2 lives. Tell me more what you meant by 2 lives.
Well, when I'm with my friends who are like me, I don't have to change.
You don't have to change.
I don't have to change the way I talk or be careful about the truth.
And when you don't have to be careful about how much of the truth you can tell,
I can be relaxed and just be myself and still feel loved and respected.
And when you don't have to change the way you talk.
I can talk from my heart. And then it's just easy and more real.
So Joaquin, share more about having to blend in with who?
With other white people.
And having to speak perfect English.
In my classes with the white professors.
Say more about the white professors and having to speak perfect English.
Well, it's the looks I get from the professors when I speak with an accent.
What kinds of looks do they give you, Joaquin?
Like I'm stupid, uneducated, not smart or perfect like the other Americans in the class.
You mean the white students?
Yeah.
Joaquin, why do you think you're treated differently than the white American students?
Because in this country, immigrants of color that are brown are seen as illegal aliens and drug peddlers.
Joaquin, that's so demeaning and insulting, isn't it? How does being described as illegal aliens and drug peddlers affect you?
It feels degrading and accusatory. And besides, alien is someone from another planet, like not here. Everyone is born from some country.
That is so true. So, Joaquin, what angers you about these kinds of painful assumptions about your people?
It pisses me off because there are drug peddlers in every country, including the United States. Do you assume that all Americans born here are drug peddlers? Get to know someone before you make such insulting generalizations. It's demeaning, it's disrespectful to my people.
So, Joaquin, how do your professors treat you differently being Guatemalan?
It's the way the professors look so surprised when you have the right answer. Like, they thought you were stupid and undereducated because you came from Guatemala and not from the United States.
Joaquin, that must be so hard to come to class knowing that you're seen by some of your professors as stupid and undereducated just because you're from Guatemala.
Just because I'm Guatemalan and speak with an accent doesn't mean I'm not as smart as the other white students.
What hurts you about the way your professors see you?
What hurts me is that they don't see me for who I am.
And who is that?
That I'm a Guatemalan and Mayan. I am my mother's son. And I come from a long line of warriors and artists, scientists and writers. Our history and the accomplishments of our people have changed and influenced the world.
So everyone, Joaquin said a lot here, didn't he? What is one thing you heard Joaquin say about his people? Lori.
Joaquin, what I heard you say is that you are your mother's son. That really touched me.
Spencer.
Joaquin, what I heard you say is that you're Mayan and Guatemalan. I mean, I can feel and hear how much pride you have in your rich lineage, Joaquin.
And Mina?
Joaquin, what I heard you say was that your people come from a long line of warriors, artists, and scientists, writers. My people are similarly underestimated.
And Ying?
Joaquin, I was really moved when you said your people have changed and influenced the world. That's the same way how I feel about the Chinese people.
Thank you so much.
Joaquin, how did it make you feel to hear how they felt about what you said?
Like I was seen and fully embraced for who I am and who my people are.
Thank you, Joaquin. Let's all give a hand for the courage it took for Joaquin to tell the truth today and to tell his story. Now what I'd like you to do is to pair up and share what touched you about Joaquin's story and what was familiar to you as a whatever your ethnicity and gender is. Remember to use your mindful inquiries. Ready, begin. Okay. So you get to see what it looks like, huh? Now, let's go one more step, okay? What happens, and this is something that I think a couple of you brought up, what happens if a student yells out, "Oh, come on, Joaquin, don't you ever get tired of being a victim?" Okay, raise your hand if you would like to learn what to do in that situation. Okay, so what we're going to do is give you a glimpse, because Norma Alicia has seen this before. We're going to give you a glimpse in our what we call advanced interventions, which deals with confrontations. And we're going to show you 3 or 4 that would really be helpful. And this is on slide number 33, Liberty. Good, and these are some that would help you. And if you could read out the first one, Yili.
I can see that you have some strong reactions to what he, she, they said, and we'll get to those. But if you wanted to find out why he, she, they said that, what would be a good question to ask him, her, them?
See how this, reconnects this person who said this to Joaquin, so they can come from a place of curiosity rather than blaming or attacking. This is another one. So when someone says, "I can't understand what you said," well, why you said that, when Joaquin? Okay, that's not my reality. Then you could always say, "So what I heard you say, Michael, is that you can't understand what Joaquin said and why he feels this way. Would you like to understand why?" What would be a good question to ask Joaquin if you wanted to find out why? So what if this person said, "Well, that's not important to me, Joaquin, whether you're Guatemalan, you're just a human being to me." And this is what you could say back to this person. Maybe his name is Thomas. "So Thomas, what I heard you say was this is not important to you, that he's just a human being, but it might be important to Joaquin. What would be a good question to ask Joaquin if you wanted to find out why his being Guatemalan and Mayan is important to me?" And another one might be, he says, "I don't know why you said that. I don't know why you said that, Joaquin. About your people. You're an American. You're in America now." And you could always say, "So what I heard you say is that you don't know why Joaquin said what he did about being Guatemalan and that he's just an American. But would you like to know why Joaquin said that it was important to him?" What would be a good question to ask Joaquin if you wanted to find out why? So these are just little glimpses right in your book under advanced interventions. And you can look those up to use those, okay? So this is kind of very quick. Unfortunately, this workshop doesn't allow me a lot more time than I'd like. But this gives you just a little glimpse of how you can take that energy and reconnect rather than taking all the time to educate the person who attacks, or simply to take care of Joaquin, but he gets to take care of himself. Now, there's one more added thing. We come back to the main group if we could. So there's one other thing that you could do that's a very simple one, and that's this one. You could ask Joaquin, given that Thomas said this to you about being a victim, how would you have liked Thomas to have reacted to you differently? And then it could be, yes, I would like to have had him say, be curious, so some empathy, ask me questions, you see, so you could reconnect them. You could also say to Joaquin, what angered you about the way he did respond to you? What hurt you? What's familiar? So that he gets to tell Thomas this, and he gets empowered. So you don't do the talking for him. You're not trying to protect and do all of that, that you redirect it. It's like Tai Chi. You put the energy back over there, and it's empowering. And for the first time, you get to share what angers you. Remember, so many times underrepresented groups can't share what angers them, what hurts them, what's familiar about this, and then what you need and want from them in the future, because someone else is doing that for you. It also, has the perpetrator or the confronter having to listen to what you're having to say. And so it keeps you both connected with each other. Okay, wow, this has gone fast. So anyone, what did you like about today? Any questions that you might have that you'd like to ask either myself or Yi Li? Any observations? What did you learn about today? Anyone? How about for you, Tiana? I haven't heard from you. You have that great smile.
I guess I was trying to hide and not be called.
Yeah.
Well, I had a comment about earlier, something I wanted to share earlier, not necessarily just about this particular segment, but I guess about this particular segment, I guess I was surprised by your sons, and I'm bad with names, so forgive me, how openly and freely he was expressing his thoughts and emotions, right? He was not holding back in any way. And I don't know if that's because of like living and working with you that he's kind of developed, that he was very expressive. And sometimes it's hard to get people to be that open and honest and to share in that way, right?
So I want you to imagine that I've now done this for 35 years. This is I just tell Yi Li, I have done 5,589 workshops in 35 years. I have been in the United States Pentagon, almost all the top 500 companies in the United States, in almost every major university, government agency, et cetera. Imagine that I walk into the United States Pentagon, 600 people, and I walk up to this woman, because I was just sharing a story of my life. And I walk up to her and she starts to cry and tells her life story. And then someone was listening to her and someone said, how the hell did you do that? You're in front of 600 people. You don't even know her. I can't even believe that she's even sharing this. And you know what I said? What you don't understand is that she and I have been talking to each other since I started. When I told my story, I could see the tears in her eyes. She knew what I was talking about. You see, like her, we've both been longing to hear the truth about what's going on. We hide it, we celebrate it, we dance to it, we eat it, we read about it, but we just don't say it out loud. We aren't even asked. I have been on this earth for 75 years, and not one person has ever asked me, what's it like to be a Chinese American man born in the flatlands of Oakland, poor? What have you had to go through? All the stories I could tell. You see, it's sitting there for you and for me. It was sitting here today when we started, wasn't it? When Michelle shared and opened us up, when Maya shared, opened us up. It was sitting here. It's always been sitting here. We just haven't been bold enough to ask. We haven't been bold enough to go, I could see that you looked away. I could see that you're crying. When I talked about, can you hear that? When I talked about this, you see, we don't look around the room to see. It happens every single second. And when you see my film, The Color of Fear, they go, how'd you get such perfect men? I just said, every workshop I could do a film because their stories could fill this room for about 10, 20, 30, 40 films because we're all waiting to tell our story. And not just that, because Norman Leeson has heard us talk about this before, is to be believed, to be moved, to be seen, to be heard, and then to change, to look at ourselves. I believe very strongly that when we see somebody that we just paired up with today, what they've had to go through to get to this room, we can never be the same again. The way that you've been heard today by someone, when someone says, oh, it's amazing, you'll now know how superficial some diversity workshops can be, that you'll want more. And you'll want change because you see not only what happens to them, but what has happened to your children. We are only one question away, everyone. Yeah. Remember the question that got Joaquin really emotional was, I said, how did it affect you? Why do you think the professors said that or saw that about you? We have discriminatory incidences that occur all over this country, but we never ask them, why do you think they did that to you? How did it affect you? What's familiar? Basic questions, aren't they? But we're rarely asked. And the truth is beautiful. It's not something to be afraid of. It's beautiful because it's the truth. And Tacita, I can see you nodding away. And what came up for you when I was sharing those, what I just did? I am just so appreciative of, and it's actually, I've been thinking recently about, I don't know, connecting with other people, strangers, just random people like at the grocery store, and being intentional about chatting. And every single time it opens up something, some sense that this person and I are connected just for 2 minutes, 5 minutes. So I'm really hearing in what you're talking about, giving the opportunity for people to tell their stories and resonating with the fact that we don't do this. Yeah. And we so underestimate our students who are having to experience this. And I think it's not because, I think we're afraid to have that because they're going to open up with all their emotions and they may be talking about you, someone who looks like you, that we don't know what to do with the emotion. And it isn't just about listening to everybody. It's about how you respond. You see, I didn't know my son was going to say what he did that day. You see, when he was 16, I remembered I said to him, I was sitting there at the table and, his mother and I are divorced. And I just said to him, what's it like for you to be Guatemalan at Berkeley High? And then he shared, oh God, you won't believe what I have to go through. And then his mother, who's white, got up to go, I got to go do the laundry. And he goes, why do you do that every time I want to talk about this? She goes, no, I don't. She goes, yes, you do. You leave the room. And then I looked at her and I just said, sit down, Linda. I think you've been afraid of this moment from the moment he was born. And she, yes, I said, I was. She said, I'm afraid he's not going to see me as his mother, but a white mother. And he told her, I don't see you as a white mother, but I want to be able to tell you my story without you taking it personally to hear me. I want you to hear what it's like to be a person of color, which you don't want to look at. I can't be white like you. I can't be. I am Guatemalan, and there's a price I pay, and it's beautiful, but it's a price I pay every day like Dad. And thus began a story. I cannot protect my son from what he has to go through. None of us can protect our children. But we can hold them when they come back to tell them that it's not something that's wrong with them, but the world. And I could see that a lot is coming up for people as am I saying that. So Maya, what is coming up for you?
I knew that when I wiped that tear, it was going to call me out. It was the emotion in your voice, hearing that you can't protect your son, and I interpreted a desire there that you wish that you could. And I felt that very strongly. And then in the last moments there, as you were speaking, I don't have children of my own, but I've come from a mixed race family as well. And my parents are also divorced, and my dad, who is white, is now remarried in a white Christian family, which is actually where I feel that I need to be the shyest and the smallest and not speak my truths. And I just imagine, what would that feel like if my dad asked me for my story about being a mixed Black woman, a mixed queer Black woman. You know, I know he loves me, but he doesn't ask for my story. He doesn't ask for my truth.
Yeah. And I think they're scared, and they don't realize what it would do for us to be able to share that story, what it would mean to us. Yeah.
I don't think that I had ever thought of what it would mean to me either.
No. Yeah. I've often thought, if we can't have our parents ask that, then how could we expect the world to? And that's why I think we have to do it here, because we're dying to be asked. And maybe that's the reality check. What's a world that you have to live in that I don't have to go through? What's that world outside of my comfortable, familiar bubble? Just like I shared before earlier today, is just because we're banning the use of talking about white privilege, our racism, our critical race theory, doesn't mean it's going away, because we feel it. It isn't about in a book. We feel it. We see it. We experience it. We're afraid that it's seeping into our classrooms, our children's thoughts about themselves. Yeah. And what was it like for you, Lin Wang? And thank you, Maya.
Yes, you caught that little tear, didn't you? Well, my son, my husband is white, and our kids are. I'm Taiwanese. I was born in Taiwan, and so they're mixed. And I do a lot of trainings on this stuff. As a participant and as a facilitator, and I think, as with a lot of our professional pursuits, for a lot of us, I think it's really what you're trying to solve something in your own life, right? And I think about, what am I going to tell them? What am I going to tell them when they're hurt? And I grew up in a Black neighborhood. It was not easy, as like the only Asian kid who was also extremely nerdy, even as Asian kids go. And I try my best, and I do this work because I don't think I'm going to change the world. I'm not going to end racism, but I have to try. We all I have a responsibility to try. And when I tell my kids the world is broken and I can't protect you, I can at least say I did my damnedest to do it. I did my best. And so will you. And so does your father, who watched The Color of Fear before I was willing to marry him.
It's a litmus test before you get married. You have to watch The Color of Fear.
Well, that was a turning point for him when
Yeah.
he saw that film. And I thought, okay, I could do this with you.
Yeah, because it's important that he understands.
Yes, because if we're going to have kids,
Yeah.
we need to talk to them about this. We can't, I mean, every one of us already so alone in the world. How can we reduce that feeling? How can we make that just a little bit better?
Yeah. And Crystal, thank you. And Crystal, I saw you nodding too. Yeah, I think the point of we are such an isolated society. We are such an isolated society. We don't know how to connect on a deep level. It's very surfacey. It's very judgmental. And I think you see it even more with this racial reckoning that we're going through with the COVID, with I think some people, I'm now noticing some people are having like a foreign policy reckoning of sorts. So I think, and yet we can't, the ability to connect deeply and understand the nuance and the emotions and everything behind all of that feels like I find very few spaces where I can have that in. My colleague and really close, adoring friend Tasita is one of the only people I can get deep with on the world's woes in a meaningful way. And so I think that isolation piece that Lynn just said, that we're really isolated, really resonates with me. And then sometimes spiritually, if I just take a step back, and actually Tasita, you mentioned this book to me years ago, and now I sort of center it when I think about the world. But if we recognize our time is so limited on the planet, we don't know when it's going to end, but it is limited. And the world is if we can just center that at our core, that like we only have a certain amount of time on this planet, like how would it change how we interact with ourselves and with one another? I think it could be such a transformative experience for us to really center like our understanding of how we live based on that. And so I think the world forgot that we're not here forever. And don't we just want to do better by each other? Don't we want to connect? Don't we not want to be, there's a time and place. I like being alone. I'm not saying I like being alone, but being isolated and being unable to connect deeply about, my lived experiences or the lived experiences of others and ways we can elevate the planet. Like there's just so few, there's so little of that. And that feels extremely daunting at times. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of what Lynn, that's what came up for me when you said the word isolated. I mean, snapshot of what was coming up for me, so. It's interesting how when you were sharing, Crystal, that I was a teacher for 25 years. And it's people ask, and I felt like I found out what I love to do in my life. So people often ask me, well, how did you become a filmmaker and then eventually doing this? I said it was not by choice. One of our former students shot my mother 5 times in the head in a robbery. And then he went down and killed 3 other women. And it profoundly changed my life. I was traumatized. But what most people don't know is that I was supposed to be in the house that day. And I got called away to a meeting. And I probably should have died that day. And so I've kept thinking all these years, I got one more day to live. I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to be real. I'm going to help people be real with each other, like you're talking about. The Buddhists have a saying, live each day as if it were a lifetime. Is this really what Crystal's saying? And really, the planet is finite. It's not like no matter what we do to it, it will live. It will either totally devastate all of us and then start again. I remember words that I want to think about today was when I was working with the Nade Indians in Arizona, the first people. And they were shared a story that when Lewis and Clark went around the United States renaming everything as they discovered it. And what ended up was they came across a group of First Nation people who spoke Spanish. And they asked them, well, why are you speaking Spanish through an interpreter? And they said, why, to welcome the new people coming. Like it seemed like, wow, it just seemed natural. And what they asked of Lewis and Clark were three things: take care of the land, share what you have, and take good care of each other, which is what Crystal is pretty much saying, isn't she? Three very simple things, and we didn't even listen. And now we're paying the price for our greed and our power and our isolation, that we really do, and we're all connected to the earth, to each other. And so it's a good reminder, isn't it, everybody? And when you talk about connection, we only had 2 hours today. Not even that, about an hour and 50 minutes with each other today. And imagine the connection that we had today. I hope that you'll never forget it, because now you'll want it again. Now you'll realize what the truth sounds like when you say it out loud. And even if it's about the truth of what's not working, it's the truth, isn't it? It'll bring us together because of that. And so in closing, I'd like to read something that I wrote, because I thought about George Floyd when I wrote this and about telling the truth. And this is what I wrote. And by the way, it comes from a book that I have coming out. It's called Where the Road Ends, the Path Begins. Sometimes you can't believe that it's happening when someone stands up and shares their story. At first, it surprises everyone. And then you realize that what they're sharing isn't just happening to one person, but to lots of other folks who have been silenced or made to doubt themselves. The beauty of when it is finally spoken out loud is that it is so disarmingly honest, so real that you can't even touch it because it feels so fragile and rare. And when it is spoken purely from the heart, it resonates a certain kind of eloquence, because throughout history, it has always been known by one word: the truth. And so I'd like to thank you all today for taking the time to come here. I'd like to thank our interpreters. Let's give them a hand too. And then also I'd like to thank Jane and Corey, who helped put this together. And also to thank you, Yi Li. And by the way, Lynn, Yi Li is also Taiwanese. And for a long time was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning doing our workshops together. So she's back in the States again. And also, I was very fortunate to have her share with me what's it like to be an immigrant in this country and what you have to go through. I think we are all the children of immigrants. We've just forgotten it. Yeah. So we have just a few minutes, about 6 minutes left. Would anyone like to share what today was like for you? What you appreciated about today? Anyone? Yes, Amy.
I'm pausing because I feel emotion going to come through in my voice, and I don't really want that to happen. It's been a difficult couple of days
for me. And I felt very isolated. There would be no support or anyone who could understand what my last few days have been like. And I didn't talk about my last few days, but the enveloping, the connection in my small group was so real and so impactful that it has been a huge salve and release and comfort for me.
Oh,
And we appreciate the two women that I was speaking with in our group.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear that, everyone? What it just felt like to have that sense of community and caring and support. Anyone else? What was it like for you?
I was just going to add, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes,
I was just going to add, as you showed us the video of your son expressing his emotion, that really hit heavy for me, because I can totally identify with everything he's saying. And I'm not Guatemalan or Mayan. I am a Black male living in America. So everything that he said totally hits home for me. And the reason why I think this is so important is because we all need to realize we all may look different, but you never know whose story is exactly the same as yours.
Yeah, exactly. The commonality of oppression, of not being seen or heard or valued. What was it like for you, Kellam?
I have been going through a lot of emotions listening to everyone's story, and I believe more strongly in the power of story in all realms, in the personal realm, in the academic realm, in the professional realm, to change people and to change our society. And I think hearing and seeing the emotion coming up and the community that has been created in this space of strangers is really affirming to me that we, by telling our stories, by sharing our stories, and by truly listening to each other, that's where I get my hope. And I think hearing all of these stories and watching as people are reacting to them doesn't make me feel despair, despite the pain and the suffering behind all of these stories. It makes me feel hope, because we are connecting to that is essentially human in each of us. And I feel really encouraged and connected and centered. And just thank you to everyone who shared today.
I was thinking that perhaps what we've done today is that we've walked each other home, taken a long, good walk with each other home. Anybody else? Anybody else?
Michelle?
Yeah, when Joaquin, your son, was sharing that he comes from a long line of warriors, I am not from immigrant. I am not the child of immigrants. I am from here and I come from nowhere else. You don't find my people anywhere outside of the state of Nevada. And walking in my truth to let every single one of you know, if you are on Turtle Island, which stretches from the northwest territories of Canada to the down of South America, we are all here. The constructs that have been put in place by people who are foreign to this land are not okay. And within my own people on different reservations, we are going through a reckoning. We are reclaiming who we are. Yes, I have my education, but my values are not yours. My values are not colonization. We can speak English and we have to reclaim a lot of things. And I do come from a long line of warriors, and I'm not going to apologize for that. And we did not lose the war. That's what colonization likes to tell Native people. And I hear that constantly. You guys lost, get over it. We didn't lose anything and we're still here. And we fight for our land. My own tribe, we're into water rights. We've been fighting ever since we've been a reservation. You look around this continent, who's fighting for this continent? So you can find your local tribes and find out what they're fighting against, because there's over 500 something of us and we are all fighting for something. And we're all still here and we're not of the mind. We kick people out. Mitakwe Oyasin is a very common phrase of the Sioux tribe, Lakota. We are all connected. Every tribe, I've been to over 200 tribes. I don't know all the tribes. None of the tribes I've ever been to have been exclusatory towards people. And when your son Joaquin looked up and said, I'm from a long line of warriors, we're still here. Just because I could speak English and just because Native people, Indigenous people can speak English, that doesn't mean that we are colonized. We are not. We are utilizing this language and living in our values. And it's been my teaching ever since growing up. I don't assume who you are. You get to tell me who you are. You get to tell me where you're from. You get to tell me whoever it is you want to be. So I've learned that I listen with an open mind by teachings that have been told to me. And unfortunately, like Joaquin, what he shared, nobody looks at me that way except for very few select people. But I know that, and it hurts, but I'm still continuing to go on. But I just wanted to say that to everyone who's here, to the first people of this continent, that you are still here. We are still here. We are not gone. We do not believe in kicking all immigrants out or anything like that. And so just to listen, and I just take heart in who I am. I will never be colonized. I will never take on, this land is your land, this land is my land, the Star Spangled Banner. I can never stand up for that, because I know it was done to my people, but we survived and we're still happy. We're not resentful. We don't want to go out and just, if we were resentful, there's over 500 of us. We would have already acted up by now, but we're not that way. So that really, I just wanted to say that from deep down in me. I'm a Native woman. We are not a stereotype, and we are here to be connected. And I listen to be connected and to learn from every single person who spoke something that I don't know. So, Sa'o Punirua, Pija'u.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm so aware of the time. So Moa, before you wrapped up, we need to call on Jane and the host to finish our meeting today.
So just before we get there, I just want to say this last thing to Michelle, is as you have often talked today, I don't imagine of you fighting against something, but fighting for something, which is what touched me. And thank you so much, because you really helped shaped and deepen this workshop today. Thank you so much. And all the rest of you too. Jane, you can help us close today.
Thank you so much, Lee Manwa and your team. And I want to thank every single one of you for attending. Let's give an appreciation to Lee Manwa and his team. Thank you so very much. We all learned a lot. I think for me, the bottom line here is, as we reflect on who we are, let's also reflect on who others are, but really not identify them. Like Michelle said, let them say who they are. Think about your students. Every student has a story. Every single one of them has a story. Are you allowing them to tell their own stories, or are you telling their stories? So let's allow students to tell their stories, provide the space. And I like what somebody said in our breakout room, not just a safe space, but a brave space. Allow them to speak their truth. Again, we want to thank you so very much for joining ENCORE this afternoon. Like I said at the beginning, we do have webinars, 2 webinars every month. Our next one is September 29th. I hope that you can all join us. And I want to appreciate again you joining us for 2 hours. We normally just have it for 1.5, but Lee Manwa requested 2 hours, and we got the 2 hours. And I'm sure we could have gone on and on and on. This was so good. Thank you so very much. So from the University of Oklahoma here in Norman, Oklahoma, I want to thank you once again. And thank you for being the Anchor community. You can join us online. You can join us by email. This broadcast will be available after 7 to 10 days. You can access that. These resources are free for you. If ever you have an idea of a webinar or workshop, please let us know, and we shall be more than happy to connect with you. Thank you again, and have a good evening. I see you, Sarah Clark.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
see Amy. Thank you all, and have a good evening.
Okay. As we say here at Stir Fry, stay safe and silly. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone.